Welcome to DABCC Radio,
where smart people listen.
Virtualization and Cloud Talk.
Featuring cutting-edge solutions from the hottest companies around the globe.
Broadcasting from the DABCC offices in sunny Sarasota, Florida.
Surrounded by computers, books, and Legos.
A Microsoft MVP, Citrix Charter CTP, VMware vEXPERT.
And your host, Douglas Brown.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of DABCC Radio. I'm quite excited about today because I get to share with you another great conversation I've had with Ruben from Nutanix FRAME. And you might remember Ruben, well, hopefully you know him, but you might remember him from last week's episode about VDI Like a Pro. And those guys are really doing some amazing stuff with the VDI Like a Pro, but also the companies they work for, the solutions they sell and support and evangelize are just great stuff. So I had so much fun, and I really love what these guys are doing so much that I asked them individually if they'd like to come on and share with us, those technologies, right? So the first one we're going to do here is with Nutanix FRAME. And been very lucky. One, I've known Ruben for quite some time. It's just absolutely a great guy, very smart. But also, he introduced me to FRAME when he first joined, before it was acquired by Nutanix. And I've been a fan for a long time. It has many great use cases, and it's just a very unique perspective on remoting. And I really like what they're doing, and it's only getting better and better. And when I put my iGel hat on, I see so many great use cases and for our customers and their customers to work together. And we actually have their FRAME app in our OS as a custom partition, and have a bunch of people using that. And it's just neat stuff. And I'm getting way ahead of myself because it's one of those technologies I quite enjoy. So with no further ado, let's dive into my interview with Ruben from Nutanix FRAME. Okay, Ruben, thank you so much for taking the time to do this with us. The folks out there listening, I say this a lot. It's always my favorite part about the podcast is not just recording it, but it's also we chat for a lot of us. A lot of times the guests I chat with these guys for 10, 15 minutes, an hour and a half. And today I had the best conversation with Ruben prior. So talked about books and life and lockdown and all this stuff. So Ruben, thanks for taking the time. Thanks for the chat previous to the podcast. And I'm really looking forward to this.
Yeah, great. Thanks for having me. Good to be here.
Yeah. So that being said, for those who might know who you are, can you, who is Ruben? What do you do?
Well, Ruben is a Dutch guy. Ruben Spruijt is the full first and last name. I'm a technologist at Nutanix and active in the end-user computing space for many, many years. 3 kids, 19, 17, 13 right now. And work from home, as many of us in this point of time. And active in the UC space, as I mentioned earlier. For a long time, run many communities. And it's great to be a part of the UC space, especially today, because it helps many of us from a business and also community perspective to work from home and to get stuff done, to get shit done, GSD, to get stuff done while working from home.
Yeah. It's interesting because we don't want to gloat about it, right? But in many ways, we're right. If this is a better way to compute. And if people would have sort of listened to us, everyone would just be, just work from home the same way I work from the office, right?
Yeah. We talked about that in the sort of pre-recording, like work from home. Both you and I, we both are used to work from home. But like indeed, if you're not used to work from home, or if you're not used to work from home regular, like what's happening right now, it can stress out people. So stay physically and mentally healthy is an art. And we talked about that briefly. Like I wrote a blog post, like the top tips to work from home. I would say search for my first name or last name with that title, the top tips to work from home. And might be helpful just to read this small blog post and help for yourself, or maybe someone in your neighborhood could use some help with some top tips.
It's definitely a very interesting time. I mean, for me and for you, it hasn't changed much. We're just not doing, not hitting the airport, which is sort of nice. Although I must confess, I'm starting to miss it, which is strange because when you travel a lot, you're like, oh no, I don't want to get on this airplane today. But,
yeah, I don't miss the airplane or airport, but just a social life. Physical, personal interaction is what I miss most.
Yeah, my favorite part about the EUC community and the SBC, the VDI, the DaaS, whatever you want to call it, dating way back, is the quality of people in this. And I bet any industry would say the same. But we really have great guys, and being that guys like you and I have been doing this for so long, I can almost anywhere I go, I run into somebody I meet, and it's truly a pleasure to see these people or meet somebody new. I was my last trip I did, I was up in Nottingham. I met this chap named Ashley, and what a great kid, what a great guy, and this guy will be somebody hopefully I'll be friends with for as long as I've known you, Ruben, and longer. So that's the piece I really, really enjoy, and that's what I miss. But otherwise, it's business as usual. Just a lot.
Just a lot more busier right now, to be honest.
Yeah.
Not only like just business wise is busier, much busier. Like EUC is hot for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
But also like busier just at home. Kids are at home. I have 3. Luckily, we have a big house, so they have their own room. So all good, but it's just different busy, both business and personal life. So
absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely. Well, let's talk a bit about Frame. This is something I was you've joined Frame quite some time ago. So when you joined, you introduced me to it. I always thought this was really quite impressed. And so maybe you could take us through a little bit of the history of Frame, where this, why, all this stuff.
Sure. Let's see, where shall we start? Well, maybe you start at the beginning. Beginning was 2012. That's when the company started. The original name was Mainframe 2. And it started with like, hey, why not do things different in end-user computing? The background of the founders, and Nicola, great guy, is one of the founders. Before Frame, he had a software company, Motion DSP. And that software company, the question they got a lot in that era was like, hey, can you run and how can you easily deliver this application as a service? And over time, then they, I would say, sold and left Motion DSP and started a new company called Mainframe 2. And nowadays it was, before acquisition of Nutanix, was called Frame. And the idea was, okay, let's use public cloud. Use GPUs at a starting point, build a service to deliver apps. Desktop didn't come up yet, but deliver apps as a service through a browser. So 2012, 2013 is like the phase where the solution was built. 2013 was the first demo with a big push in blog post where people could run Photoshop in a browser. And it was like unseen. We talk about 2013 GPUs in cloud. AWS was the first platform we used for that. And then in 2014, the first customers, I think 7 or 8. I didn't join Frame in 2014, but that's what I remember from internal conversations. Customers like Adobe and Bentley, like these type of customers with ISVs, independent software vendor. I would say mindset and solutions who were really interested in running apps in a browser, including like high-end graphics applications. These were the apps we used in that earlier phase. And then in 2015, the solution got launched. I remember, I think it was NVIDIA's GTC, where both Sean and Benny, we spent time together at a GPU technology conference in San Jose, where Nicola and myself, we met, and he introduced, I was for sure me, I'm not sure about Sean and Benny, but for sure me, around Frame, and gave a demo, and since then we stayed in touch. And then from B happened. I joined Frame. Over time, the product, when the product started, was really public cloud, servers, GPU, the product evolved to multiple public clouds. We were launching partner of Microsoft with the Azure NV6, the NV series, so the GPU-based machines. The solution, the platform itself, of course, evaluated from app only to app and desktop, from AWS to Azure. After the acquisition of Nutanix, or by Nutanix in 2018. Let me double check. Yeah, I think it was 2018. The product just evolved. More features, more use cases, different customers, different customer use cases. All these things happened. But from the start, it started as a cloud service, multi-cloud in mind, run everything in a browser, make the solution better every week. Every deployment cycle is much faster because it's a service. And that was, like, especially in early days, was really unseen and really special. Even today, it is special, but in the early days, it was like extreme unique, I would say.
Yeah.
And then Nutanix acquired Frame a little bit more than a year and a half ago, in August. Yeah, and that skyrocketed the I would say adoption, conversation, on many levels. That was a great event, I would say. I've seen multiple events like that. Before Frame, I was part of Atlantis. Learned a lot. Also had a great time, but also learned things not to do. and acquisition doesn't always mean a good thing. Sometimes it can be like a hockey stick upwards, like acquisition of Frame by Nutanix, and also can be a hockey stick effect downwards, and that was the case in Atlanta. So learn from that as well. Prior to acquisition, Microsoft was one of the investors in Frame, one of the three bigger investors, I would say, and that's also very helpful in connection and conversation with Microsoft people. Even today, that's very helpful. So yeah, good stuff happened.
That's very interesting. I did not know Microsoft had money in Frame. That's really that's interesting.
Yeah, I think just when I joined, it just happened. So that I think was investor round 28 million, something like that, was the investor round, and Microsoft was one of the investors. Yeah,
very interesting. I want to get to
the other one was In-Q-Tel. In-Q-Tel is the investment arm for the intelligence community.
Oh.
They were also investors in Frame prior to the acquisition, which gives us a good, I would say, good insights and good segue into the intelligence community and different large customers in that particular space.
Fascinating, very fascinating. I'll get back to Microsoft in a little bit when we talk about the competition and WVD and how these things compare, and VDI and DaaS and blah, 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 blah. But can you talk a bit more about what Frame actually is? Like, how does it work? What does the back end look like? Maybe the architecture of it, the technical bits of Frame.
Yep. So Frame, let's start with a little bit like the basics. Frame is a service and not software. So that's why this industry is called desktop as a service. Although, like, the term desktop itself can be a little bit misleading, because you can run apps or desktops and run applications inside the desktop. But nevertheless, that industry is called desktop as a service. And that's where Frame fits. Keep in mind, desktop as a service can mean different things to different people. So if you ask a big system integrator or a large managed service provider, and you ask them, hey, what kind of workspace service do you provide? They often are also mention, hey, we do desktop as a service. And for them, it's like the complete package, maybe like with first line support, with application onboarding, and so on and so on. From a vendor perspective, and that's where Nutanix Frame fits, the desktop as a service is like a component in the complete stack. It communicates with the infrastructure side to run apps and desktops, and it also helps with the application onboarding, the user workspace, user profiles, application integration, like this whole package. And the desktop as a service is, you could call it a control plane or broker, which encompasses many functionality, remoting protocol, secure access services, load balancing functionality, APIs, analytics. user profile management, user profile containerization, image management, capacity management. Like all these things I mentioned in 2 sentences are all part of this service. And this service is developed and operated, maintained by the vendor, in this case, Nutanix. And that's what it is. So the Frame service, or Xi Frame, Xi is like the overarching umbrella of Nutanix cloud services, software as a service services. That's where Frame also fits. So Xi Frame is born as a cloud service, simple to use, API-driven, multi-cloud, multi-tenancy, flexible usage models. It's all part of this service. In a Frame context today, this service runs on AWS. That's how it is today. Why? Because I mentioned earlier when we started, when the company started in 2012, Azure didn't exist as it is today. So we started using AWS as a cloud service. It's really reliable cloud service. It works well. It's documented. We know how to operate and to use the components and services inside AWS big time. And from a customer perspective, by now I just share because you asked, hey, can you share a little bit more tech details? But if you consume the DaaS service, normally you don't care where that is running. You don't know where Salesforce is running their control plane, as an example, or maybe where Netflix is running their control plane. You just consume that service. Important in that consumption model is like, hey, where is it located? That might be for some customers or some organizations important. But in the desktop as a service context, the actual application or desktops are not running in the control plane. These are running in workload machines. And these workload machines can run air quote everywhere. They can run in the Frame context on Azure or on AWS or on Google, but they also can run in your own data center by using Nutanix AHV, a Nutanix visualization platform. So the conversation about where's the data and what is stored and where is it stored is a good question to ask. But the actual application and the actual user data is not in that control plane piece. And the control plane, of course, is like has its SLAs, has its availability, is leveraging cloud services to meet that, is using like a very fast update cycle from a process and technology perspective to make it happen, so that you can do weekly updates. That's what we do. Weekly updates with fixes, but also with new functionality built into the solution.
Sounds great. Ruben, can you talk a bit about use cases? Where do you see that this fits best? Or is there a place that it fits best?
So talk about use cases for DaaS and specifically for Frame. The tagline for Frame is run any application in a browser. And the execution of the application or the execution of the desktop can be done in public cloud or can be done on premises nowadays. When Frame started in the earlier days, we only had public cloud, Azure and AWS in the earlier days to run apps and desktops. And that has its pros and cons, especially with GPU type workloads. You get a full GPU, like a full NVIDIA GPU to be used, and you pay for a full GPU. The great thing in cloud is, in public cloud, it's moving fast. Good example is that AMD is entering this space with Microsoft and Azure specifically to do slicing of GPUs, which is great because it will unlock new use cases. I want to have a slice of a GPU because my application only requires a segment of CPU resources, and therefore I pay I have a lower cost for that VM, which unlocks new use cases. When the price for a GPU machine is, 40 cents, 30 cents, something like that as a starting point, instead of $1.20 or £1.20 or €1.20. Yeah, it helps in unlocking new use cases, and I see that already happening in education, where companies or universities reach out to me like, hey, I want to use Frame, I want to use just a browser access. I have students they use their own machine, they have a browser, and they want to run air quote any Windows application, including more resource-intensive applications. And then it's great to have machine types where you pay 30 cents, 40 cents for an entry-level workstation, cloud workstation, and that's great stuff. When Nutanix acquired Frame of course, the topic was, okay, how can we use Frame in an on-premises context? How can we leverage Nutanix AHV and run workload machines on-premises, close to where the data is? For many of us, we know when application and data are close to each other, that gives the best application experience. And also, from that perspective, gives a much better user experience. So running workload machines, virtual apps, and desktops on-premises, powered by AHV and delivered through Nutanix FRAME, that also unlocks a huge new set of use cases. People who feel comfortable with the cloud control plane, people see the benefit of a control plane as a service, the desktop as a service, while running your apps and desktops close to data in the existing data center environment, unlocks I would say, a sort of explosion of new use cases. So in the early days, it was, I would say, AEC firms, education, security firms, smaller companies or larger companies with a focus on a certain set of applications. Now I see small and large companies with hundreds of apps they want to deliver them as a service. They see benefits of Frame. So it unlocks complete new use cases. And finally, there are also scenarios where Frame or any DaaS solution does not fit. There are scenarios in defense industry or extremely highly regulated environments, especially non-US, where like the desktop as a service approach doesn't fit. People or organizations cannot rely on a cloud service. From a legal perspective, as an example, maybe they don't have the trust yet in that type of cloud service. So I see that happening as well. In US, one of the items Frame can do is use GovCloud, both on the Azure side and on the AWS side. We are able to use services in like government context. So it's a specific certification for that, and that's what we have. So we can provide desktops and applications as a service in GovCloud or Azure government type approach. Doesn't apply for Europe or Asia or any other regions in the world, but for US it also unlocks use cases, and that's a great thing.
Very cool. Makes sense. Very cool. Very cool. Sounds good. Where do I go from here? So VDI versus DaaS. I mean, you talked about this one a little bit also, right? Anything more to say there, or? Yeah,
let's see. It's an interesting one, right? Because when we talk about VDI, both of us know that VDI is not the complete thing. VDI is like virtual desktop infrastructure. But I use VDI as like a sort of phrase a lot because it will encompass as both apps and desktops. So I mentioned virtual apps and desktops a lot. And that for me is right now VDI, although I know that VDI can mean different things to different people. Sometimes there is overlap, VDI approach, desktop as a service approach. But there are also key differences between VDI and DaaS. So on VDI, it's much more like build your own. You have the skills. It's an art to design and build a VDI, virtual apps and desktops platform. While on the desktop as a service side, it's you consume air quote VDI platform as a service. That's a differentiator. From the platform itself perspective, it's on the VDI side. It's I would say yearly manual update cycle. It's a tested, proven, pretty mature. It's a mature platform, and you're not depending on the internet from a connectivity perspective. The connection to the control plane. On the desktop as a service side, it's a service, so it's automatically updated, often very fast. So in the Frame context, weekly. It's an emerging technology and relies on internet connectivity. From a Frame perspective, there are two things. Imagine, Doug, you log in. That's the authentication piece. That's the interface you see in front of you. We call a launchpad. Is a service, is part of the service. But if you click on application or click on desktop, then the second phase kicks in, and the Frame remoting protocol is being used to run and to connect to the VM directly. So if that VM is, for instance, running in your own data center, there is no connection, so no frame remoting protocol connection to the control plane itself. It's just direct connection to that VM. So imagine you have a session running and the internet connection breaks. That session will just keep on running because you're local and that VM is local. So there are some nuances, but in essence, you could say, it relies on internet connectivity because otherwise you cannot re-authenticate or you cannot authenticate. From a cost perspective, VDI is a capital consumption model, so capital upfront, and it's much more a fixed workload VM cost. While on the desktop as a service side, it's like an OPEX model, so you pay for what you consume. Or if you use the workload machines on-prem, it could be a mixture of OPEX and CAPEX. And if it's fully in public cloud, you have an extremely flexible infrastructure as a service cost. You pay for the machines you power on. That's the bulk of the cost in public cloud from that perspective. If you look at regions, on the VDI side, it's like your data center, your co-location, your local region. Maybe you have like a couple of them, but in the desktop as a service side, it's like all available cloud regions. And when the desktop as a service solution in the Frame context supports on-prem, you can also leverage on-prem with that. So all the cloud regions available, except China. I would say China has its specific rules and regulations. But except China, we can leverage all the Azure, Amazon, Google regions, including on-prem, co-location, your own data center. And finally, if you look at more agility, VDI side is I would say moderate deployment time with fixed capacity, the equipment you have in your own data center. And on the desktop as a service side, it's like a much faster deployment time. And also from a usage perspective, and that's what's driving a lot of companies to desktop as a service and a much flexible usage pattern. So, long story short, there is for sure a VDI versus DaaS. There's overlap, but there are also clear differences between both like virtual apps and desktops, on-prem, air quote VDI, and desktop as a service with the control plane as a service, where you can run workload machines in public cloud, or you can run workload machines on-prem.
Makes sense. Yeah, I think of VDI as sort of I own it, I pay for it, I manage it, I build it, I'm responsible for it, right? Where DaaS is I basically manage it and I pay for what I need and use it when I need. It's sort of I hate this analogy, I really do, but why make your own power when you can just get what you need, right? But of course, that power needs to be reliable and stable and available and what have you. And I think, just like anything, thin clients is another great example of this. Is, if you look at it, when DaaS first sort of hit the market, right, and you keep that same mindset, this is not where you want to go. But it's not your father's DaaS, right? It's not, it's a lot more advanced today, and because of the clouds, because of the software, because of everything, right? And
and also like the network connectivity, the ability to use GPUs, the advances in remoting protocols,
correct?
The advances in decoding capabilities on thin clients on any device, browser access. People are used to get instant access. Straight away, they use mobile apps, they use web apps, software as a service apps. So that mindset, that's why Frame started. Actually, I mentioned that earlier, 2012, a long time ago. With that mindset, okay, let's do things differently, and that's how Frame got skyrocketed. Yeah,
I love it. I do. So I brought up thin client. And so I want to talk about because of the nature of what Frame does, why do you need a big fat client on the end? So we've been talking about IGEL and Frame for quite some time, but this doesn't have to be an IGEL only answer, of course. Where do you see something like an IGEL type of solution fit with or how do you see that fit with Frame?
So it sounds strange from a Frame perspective. We don't care because the only thing on the endpoint is, you need a browser. And whatever the endpoint is, from a frame perspective, we don't care. But at the end, we do care, because we both are in this game to deliver great user experience, and we both know that also the endpoint has impact in user experience. And there's a huge difference if you run, as a simple example, a Raspberry Pi or the latest UD3 iGel device. It has different hardware characteristics, has different decoding characteristics, has different resources, and that has or might have impact in user experience. So at the end, we do care, and we want to deliver a great user experience. So from a frame perspective, I already mentioned the tagline: run any application in a browser. The iGel OS has a good browser. Firefox is preloaded. We can use that. It works. There could also be downsides of only a browser. There are certain things a browser cannot do well or cannot do. Let me give you an example. So imagine I want to have a multi-monitor configuration. The browser has its quirks when you have multi-monitors in just a browser access. If I open a frame session with browser only, it automatically creates a new tab, a new window for the extra screen, and then the user experience to move, for instance, full of windows from one screen to the other physical screen is a little bit strange. That's an example. Or maybe you want to use Smart Card, and the browser doesn't give you access to the certificate store. Could be a reason. Or maybe you have very specific devices you want to redirect. Could be where the browser can be limited or doesn't work. That's the reason why we're building a frame app for Windows, Mac, and Linux. It's in internal early access. You and your colleagues have access to that, and it's not a secret. There's not rocket science. And the beauty of this frame app, I'm not calling it client, because a frame app approach is different than others are doing today in like the VDI DaaS space, because the engine of the app is a browser engine, and the wrapper of this engine gives access to local resources where it applies, and that's happening right now, and that will be very helpful for customers who are using thin clients. Use the frame app for Linux on that, and it will unlock, I would say, maybe new use cases and or different experience when using the frame app for Linux on iGel as an example, as a great example.
You got it. In fact, if somebody's interested in this, you can just reach out to one of your iGel representatives, and we can actually get you a build of the iGel OS with the frame app pre-installed. You just point it to the back end and away you go. It's real simple.
I think the core message as well, like, hey, people would say, well, so you're focusing right now on the app. The answer is no. We do whatever we can to deliver the functionality and great user experience in a browser.
Yeah.
The frame app is just a different engine, different methodology to deliver that. But the 6-7 years of development we already spent in delivering great user experience in a browser. Hey, what we do today and what we've done in the past is one-on-one applicable to the frame app. So the 60 frames per second, frame remoting protocol, microphone support, clipboard support, cloud storage integration, like all this whole list of functionality which are part of the frame remoting protocol and part of the frame service is applicable to the frame app. And then the frame app will have very specific, have its own roadmap. It will have very specific additional functions the browser cannot do. That's where the frame app kicks in.
Makes sense. You're not moving backwards in any way. You're still 100% moving forward with everything you've done. And
focusing on like HTML5 delivery, and that can be done through browser. That's the main point, and can be done by browser engine, the frame app.
Makes sense. Yep. You brought up WVD earlier, and someone could probably see that as a competition. So, of course, there's Citrix and VMware and, the traditional way of doing things and blah, 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 blah. Let's talk a bit about this competitive landscape and, how do you compare and contrast against all these guys?
Yeah, good question. I think the reality today is that we work together and we compete. That's the reality, and welcome to 2020. That's how it is. We work very closely with Citrix. And in some degree, and there's overlap. We compete. We work close with VMware and we compete. We work close with Amazon. We compete. We work close with Microsoft and we compete. Hey, welcome to the new world. That's how it is. And yeah, I don't think we as an industry should be really like panicking about that. It's healthy. Competition is extremely healthy from a customer, consumer, partner perspective. It's great to have options. It's up to us as an industry and as vendors to explain where the solution fits and where the solution does not fit, and based on, I would say, idea challenge the customer, the partner has. You write down what the requirements are, and then you match that with the right solution, and not, hey, let's push for a solution and then see what the outcome is. That's a really bad approach. And my background is consulting for many, many years. I always try to really understand what the use case is, and based on that, you pick and choose. And then you can have I would say, reasonable and a good conversation with customer, with partner about, hey, where's Frame different than others. And of course there is, and I've written these kind of documents myself, like in the earlier days, probably 6, 7, 8, 10 years ago, like VDI Smackdown, GPU Smackdown, UEM Smackdown, EMM Smackdown. It was really team effort, a community team effort. It's not that I wrote it myself alone. It was team effort to write and to investigate that. So yes, that conversation about, hey, what kind of feature is unique to Microsoft, to Amazon, to VMware, to Citrix, to Nutanix. Of course, that is an important topic along the line, but not the first conversation you should have. It always starts with with understanding the use case. But if that is clear, then for sure, then the conversation will start. Okay, what is Frame able to deliver? What is Frame not able to deliver? Just as important as to understand what is Frame capable of doing so. And because this DaaS space is, if you ask me, like if you look at the vendors in this space, it's let's see, top of my head, it's like Amazon Workspaces, Amazon AppStream. Workspaces is focused on more like persistent desktop, while AppStream is focused on I would say non-persistent application streaming, non-persistent application delivery. As Citrix, strong partner, also from a Nutanix perspective, has a broad view and broad spectrum of solutions in their, I would say, virtual app and desktop strategy, but also outside that strategy with analytics and with security. VMware also strong in that particular space. Microsoft entering this space with Windows Virtual Desktop. They need to enter this space. If you ask me, they need to compete against Amazon from a cloud perspective. They want to make Azure. I would say they want to make Office 365 more sticky, and they need to pump up the usage of Azure. And if more and more customers are bringing their data to public cloud, as we already mentioned, it's from an application performance perspective much better if the app and data are close to each other. So it's a great segue for Microsoft into building something new. And WVD is new. They tried to do like air quote DaaS before with Azure Remote App. That failed because you cannot just simply pick up software and convert it to as a service. If the software is not designed from the ground up to deliver as a service, you just cannot pick up and sort of duct tape that as a service. And that's what I see in general a little bit in our space, that vendors pick up the software and try to make it a service. But we'll see what time will tell if that is the right approach, or if that approach is not the right approach. I need to redevelop like core elements of that air quote software, so that it is really a service. And so to summarize that, I would say start with end user computing strategy. Understand what is desktop as a service, and why should you care about desktop as a service. We talked about that a little bit earlier. Understand what is desktop as a service from a vendor perspective, from a customer and partner perspective. We talked about that earlier. You have the infrastructure layer, you have the desktop as a service layer, you have a sort of software-defined workspace layer with the users and the apps and the application integration. And then if you understand that complete picture, map that with the use cases and the functional requirements, then you map that with what Frame and others can do. And I would say what makes Frame unique is it's extreme, like simple. Simple is a very powerful item in the sort of toolbox. Simplicity is an art. I think Nutanix masters that art, and Frame masters that art as well. And of course, every vendor will say we are simple and simple to use, easy to set up. None of the vendors will say, hey, we build a complex and shitty solution and you spend weeks to set it up. So none of them will say that, right? But I would really challenge the listeners to challenge that. Like, hey, how simple can you start an evaluation? Very simple. Can you just be like onboarded simple? And if it's not simple, that says something, if you ask me. Then I think the other topic is about experience, both admin, developer, and user experience. Every vendor will say we deliver a great experience. Well, I would say challenge the vendors in that. And our approach, the Nutanix approach, Frame approach, is different. The browser focus is a core element in the user experience, as I mentioned earlier. For us, the browser is the core engine to run to deliver virtual apps and desktops. For many others in our space, the browser, actually for all others in our space, the browser is the backup plan, like Plan B. You don't have the client, agent, receiver, whatever installed. Okay, now you can go to the browser access. For Frame, it's the other way around. We focus on browser access and deliver high frame rates, great user experience, special keyboard combination, audio and video in sync, like different things as part of the Frame remoting protocol delivered through browser. And then a key differentiator is a multi-cloud, hybrid cloud. There are strong partners, strong competitors who focus on, I would say, single cloud, public cloud, and totally makes sense for them from their point of view. Frame approach is like multi-cloud, hybrid cloud, multi-tenancy built into the solution, simple to use, built into the solution. And I would say sort of final thing is like flexible consumption model, named user, concurrent user, maybe monthly payment, flexible up and down as part of that consumption model. So yeah, different. I would say different points of view, depending on the starting point, depending on what you have today, depending where you feel comfortable. You cannot say Frame is unique in X, Y, or Z. It depends on the context. If you compare Frame to Amazon Workspaces, it's a different conversation than Frame comparing with VMware Horizon or with VMware Horizon Cloud as an example. So it depends.
I love it. Future of DaaS, future of Frame. Where do you see all this stuff going?
I completely see it as an extreme bright future. Why? Well, I'm a positive guy overall, so that helps. Positive point of view, but also when you look at the vendors in this landscape, they all, I would say, move in and make big steps in the DaaS space. And when you just ask around people in the community, if you ask customers, they all are more and more focused to as a service, and that happened with Office. That's happening with unified communication. That's happening with identity, and that's also happening with like the air quotes control plane or the broker. And that's what I see happening with Nutanix, with Amazon, with Microsoft. Like all the vendors in that space are heading in that direction. So it will happen. The question is when and for who. And there always will be scenarios where it does not happen for a particular use case. So does Exchange today. There are still customers and there's still partners who are implementing, updating and maintaining on-prem Exchange environments for good reasons. And there's nothing wrong with that at all. But there are also a lot of customers who moved from on-prem to Office 365 or moved from on-prem unified communication to as a service with Teams or with Zoom or whatever the service is. And that's what I see happening with the control plane as well. And then, in my opinion, it's important to be able to support both on-premises and public clouds. because moving the data from A to B is not that easy because it's so interconnected and so integrated. That's why it's so important to have a hybrid approach so that you can also pick and choose the workload while still having a central, simple to use, managed head control plane as a service, this DaaS service. So where it's heading to, more and more features are being added to DaaS to fill certain gaps in the compared to air quote VDI is what I see happening. I see that more and more customers are extremely interested and using desktop as a service. I also see that from a community perspective, running VDI like a pro with Mark and Christian. Different questions around DaaS, and you see adoption, moving to the DaaS space. And I also see, like I mentioned it briefly earlier, with new instance types, with other network connectivity, new use cases are unlocked in DaaS. And when we can do slicing of GPUs in public cloud, when there's more competition in public cloud, it's also healthy because, well, more competition will drive costs down, innovation goes up. I think competition is a healthy thing. It keeps vendors focused and not sloppy and not like, hey, we'll see. No, it's good to have competition in that space, and we all benefit from that also in the DaaS space.
Yeah, totally agree. Well, Ruben, we're pretty much out of time, so I have one more question, and that is, you do a lot of community work, so I'm curious if there's any Frame community efforts going on, and at the same time, if somebody wants to learn more, what do they need to do?
Yeah. Well, listen to podcasts as a good segue into learning more. This podcast, but podcast is a great way to, when you exercise, when you walk the dog, when you're in a plane or train or doing the dishes or whatever it is listen and learn. We talked about prior to the recording about reading books and listening to audiobooks. So for me, that is a great way to learn more. Just reading in general is a great way to learn more. So blog post, I would say search for my name, Nutanix FRAME, Ruben. You will see a long list of great blog posts, like VDI versus DaaS is a good one. What makes Frame unique compared to others is a good blog post. So read. And if you don't know, or if you have questions which are not answered yet, I would say reach out to community friends, reach out to Doc, reach out to me. Don't feel shy. We don't bite. We are friendly guys.
I do.
Do you bite, or you're a friendly guy, Doc?
The friendly guy part.
Exactly. And so that's why I believe in community. It's helping each other on different levels. Can be technology-wise, can be like just benefiting from each other from a personal perspective, from a mental perspective. I've seen many great examples past years, years, and multiple years where I learned from others. When I was in trouble, I reached out to friends. When others were in trouble, I had challenges, business, personal, they reach out to me. And that's how life should be. Help each other from both technical and personal perspective. And that's what I like about community. And that's why our Frame in community through the Nutanix Technology Champions and also in other communities, plays a role. Again, if you have questions, if you want to evaluate Frame, if you want to know more about Frame, or non-Frame topics, as I mentioned earlier. If it's personal, business, insights of being part of a startup, lessons learned, work from home lessons learned, the top books to read this quarter, whatever the question is, feel free to reach out, and I'm convinced you will benefit from that and you will learn from that. And so do I. By asking a question, I also learn. Sometimes I get a trigger like, hey, maybe I should spend more time here, or maybe I should help colleagues more here. Let's write a blog post about that. So asking questions will help you, and also will help Doug and myself and many others in this space.
Yeah, I have a saying: smart people listen, and together we are better. And that's that says a lot. So,
yep.
Ruben,
thanks for this podcast, Doug. Good stuff.
It's always a pleasure to chat with you, Ruben. Yeah, true pleasure. I mean, it's just my last words on community, and I, first and foremost, I love what Frame is doing. I love what you guys are doing. I'm very thankful that I know someone like you, Ruben, that introduces me to Frame and such. When you joined, right, and to follow along with what you guys are building is absolutely amazing. And being from the iGel side, I am hearing from customers and partners that have been using our OS with the iGel app installed, and the feedback's been just absolutely amazing. So kudos to you for that. And then just from the community side, everything that Ruben's ever done and everything, it's just such a great place to be. And we talked about it the previous podcast we did on the VDI like a pro, and we really hit the community hard in a good way, of course. With all the benefits you get, it's truly a pleasure, because the community is the reason I know guys like Ruben. And at the end of the day, these people made my my life a hell of a lot better. I'll tell you that much. So
likewise, same here.
So Ruben, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy day. And we're all busy nowadays, and especially in this this remoting world. So to take a couple hours of your time to do this with me is a true pleasure and honor for me. So thank you so much.
Thanks.
Okay, that concludes another successful episode of DABCC Radio. As always, I want to thank my guest for today, Ruben from Nutanix FRAME, and I really enjoyed chatting with Ruben. He's there's two types of people you bring on a podcast or a TV show or video show, or you talk to in life, right? The kind that you sort of ask a lot of questions, just sort of lead them along. Then the kind that you just sort of get out of their way and let them do their thing. And Ruben is definitely one of those guys. I love listening to what he has to say. I love hearing his opinions. I love hearing his views on the world, right? The guy is just as smart as anyone I know, and really also an absolutely wonderful person. So truly my pleasure to chat with Ruben and share this conversation with you guys. I hope you enjoyed it. Definitely check out what Nutanix FRAME is doing, and what Ruben's doing, and VDI like a pro, like we talked about last week, and what have you. And of course, if you're an iGel customer or a Frame customer and want to use a better endpoint, definitely check out what iGel's doing with the Nutanix FRAME app, as we discussed. It's really neat stuff, and I had Ruben reached out to me in the early days and sort of got that ball rolling, so I've been following along and seeing what's going with that, and it's really neat stuff. So really, really neat stuff. Neat technology. And when you're a techie, what do you love more than anything else? Well, you love technology that solves problems, and number two, you love neat technology. In most cases, they're one and the same, right? So what else do I say? But thank you guys all for joining this episode. I hope you're all well. I hope that your family and your friends are well. It's a strange time. I look forward to seeing everybody again. I've always been a sort of a techie nerd. I don't have any problem staying home. It doesn't bother me one bit. My wife is here, and everything's great. It's fun. You can just geek out all the time, right? It's a lot of fun. But I'm really starting to get the itch to go see my friends again and see so many of you guys. And like I always say, one of the best perks of my life is most places I go, I get to run into somebody that I've met before and that I know and that I call a friend, or, what do I say? So I can't wait to see you all again. What do I say? On that note, guys, take care. Have an absolutely awesome weekend, and great Easter. And I'll chat with you all soon. We have another great podcast coming up on WVD. So with another one of those VDI like a pro guys, hint. So anyway, thanks all. Have a great day. And thank you for listening to DABCC Radio.
DABCC?
DABCC.
Say it again, DABCC.
DABCC.
Can you say it again, DABCC?
DABCC.
How about DABCC?
DABCC.
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 DABCC.